Hi, I'm Gary Stearman, and I'm inviting you to the Homeward Bound Prophecy Conference, May 19th through 22nd, 2022. You'll be blessed, and you'll want to be there because things are happening in this world right now that you need to know about. To register, see the number on your screen and give us a call, or check our website, prophecywatchers.com. Join us. We'd love to see you.
I'll be there too.
He will.
Are science and faith mutually exclusive? Stick around and find out. Welcome to the program today. My name is Mano Gonzalez, and I'm here in studio with Josh Peck.
Hey,
Welcome,
great to
Josh.
be back. Thank you.
The question that really comes up often is, and you see it from different sides, science, hard, fast, provable, empirical, faith, from the secular perspective, make-believe, wishful thinking, whatever, and they often try to force this mutual exclusivity with it.
Yeah, basically what it is, the interpretations are mutually exclusive, but real science and real faith go together hand in hand. And when I was writing Unraveling the Multiverse, that was one of the first things that came up, is how do we deal with this? Is it actually the science that's in conflict with religion, with Christianity? Or is it how the science is being portrayed? So Unraveling the Multiverse, I got into quantum physics and all this really extreme science. But what I've found out is the science itself really goes right along with what the Bible says. But the interpretations that a lot of scientists will put on scientific discoveries, the interpretations don't. So they'll say, like I heard one scientist say one time I think it was in a debate, that we know that there is no afterlife because there's no quantum field to take the information anywhere.
Wow.
And it's like, if there's an afterlife that's going to go beyond, a quantum field is what reality is kind of made of, in essence. It's what births particles, or what we think of as particles. But it's still a physical thing. It's a physical part of nature. Afterlife is something outside of that. Yeah. So, but he said that in a debate as if it was just fact. And that's how a lot of these scientists are. So the confidence they have make the interpretation sound like it's science, but it's not, it's interpretation. So what we want to do as Christians, or just as thinkers, we want to get into what does the science really say, and does that conflict, or does it agree with the Bible? And in every way that I've found so far, it's agreed.
It's important to remember that as Christians, we don't take our thinking caps off. We also don't, as a true biblical-minded Christian, God is the creator. He's the one that created all that we know. We should never be scared of true science, right?
Right. I mean, there have been scientific discoveries made from the Bible. There was undersea waterways were discovered, and I think I wrote about that in there as well, but based on a passage from the Bible that I think his name was Montaigne Murray or something like that, but he discovered these underwater channels based on a Bible verse.
Ecclesiastes, yeah.
Yeah, so these kind of things are in there, and that does happen. God speaking everything into existence. Quantum physics today says that everything in reality is either strings or quantum fields, but it's just all energy. And the energy can't be created or destroyed, so it must come from somewhere outside of our physical reality. Now, they'll say like extra dimensional stuff, but essentially that's what we're talking about. The creation account, God's creative energy, however he did what he did, it's still here. God's still here. He didn't just wind the clock and leave us alone. So I think when we have proper biblical interpretations, that actually will aid in the progression of science in a good way. Science is kind of going in some negative ways now. One of the newest things is the metaverse, which I know you wanted to talk about, but things like that are going to keep coming up. So, we just need to study, find out what's really going on, and then learn how to handle it.
When you look at what's happening today in our modern scientific world, they try to make this really hard and fast distinction between those that are of faith, that they have nothing to contribute, that they're biased, that they have complete presuppositions. But when you look at history, when you look at the those of Isaac Newton, you know, Kepler, all these guys were very Christian. They were biblical believers, but they were able to bring what they thought was God's handiwork and bring it into an understanding which was orderly. So don't believe the lie that to be a Christian or a person of faith, you can't be scientific, because the modern world today, their entire inheritance of scientific understanding is based on, again, Isaac Newton and others who were clearly followers and believer in a creator. Well, I want to read here your subtitle, The Christian's Guide to Quantum Physics, Entities from Higher Realities, Strange Technologies, and Ancient Prophecies Being Fulfilled Today. So, you know, what a great book, because it is kind of a great primer for people who want to come and say, well, I don't really know what that means. Let Josh Peck be my guide.
Well, and that's the point, because when I was researching for this book, what I realized there really aren't a lot of quantum physics books that people like me and you can understand. Like, I had to really study to find out just even what these people are trying to say, you know, let alone understand the big concepts. And so what I wanted to do was, you know, once I had a handle on that, I wanted to break it down and simplify it for anybody else. Because if you think about it, this is God's creation. He wants us to know him. And there's Bible passages that even talk about knowing him through the creation, that's evidence of God. Well, if that's true, it should be simple. And the big concepts in quantum physics are a lot more simple than scientists make it out to be. Now, there are complex things, but they don't have to be explained the way that they're typically explained. So I think what that does when scientists use this kind of language, it's almost like a separate language from English, but when they use this really technical language, it creates this division between science and religion, because most of the lay people are going to, most Christians are going to be more lay people. Not everybody's going to be that interested in quantum physics to know what all the terms mean, and it creates that divide. So the church doesn't really pay attention to what's going on in science, and science tries to push that divide further, which actually I think that occurred because when technology, science was being discovered more and more after Isaac Newton and stuff, I think people started realizing, you know what, we can do things that God doesn't want us to do. So if we continue being, you know, Christian, we're not going to be able to do some of these things. And it's just a theory, but I think that's kind of where that divide started, because now we have, I mean, some of the most amazing medical breakthroughs, technologically wise, and some of the most horrific things imaginable in our world today. So I think when we can really look at what's going on, understand what's happening, like at places like CERN, there's a lot of, I would say, unfounded fear around CERN. There are some things to be concerned about for sure, but there are also a lot of things that just aren't going to happen. But when you look at the actual science, it's there and it's accessible. It's just, it basically just needs an interpreter. So I'm hoping that this book is that's like my small, humble effort to try to be that interpreter for people who want to know what's going on in our technological age.
You know, here's a question, you know, for those of us that we love the Bible, we read the Bible, we believe the Bible. I think if you read the Bible straightforward, and I was to ask you, do you believe in a spiritual realm? I think all of us would say, well, yeah, I think we believe in a spiritual realm. But on the other hand, we as Christians, maybe we lack the ability for the scientific, you know, endeavors. When God creates the universe, he, you know, God is outside of it. He's transcendent. He creates this construct, this entire large system of what we call physics, but we also have, you know, quantum physics, and you have all the ranges of the physics. But do you think that the spiritual world, we just throw a label on it, that it's really, in reality, it's physical, but it's just outside of our immediate perception?
Yeah, so I would describe it as extra dimensional. I mean, the more that I've looked into this, the more that I see extra dimensional and spiritual are synonyms.
Yeah.
Especially if taken from, you know, a Christian perspective. Now, a scientist would not say that unless, you know, maybe if you find a New Ager or something, they might, but they're going to have a vastly different interpretation than we would. But the way that I see extra dimensional reality, and this is what we mean when we say multiverse, you know, we have our physical universe. There's is one of those that we know of, but there might be others. Now, scientists will go crazy with that and say that they're inhabited, or there's other versions of you and me, and I don't believe in any of that. I don't think there's any reason that they have to be inhabited by other versions of us, but they might be inhabited by angelic beings, or what we could even just call today extra-dimensional entities. So when we talk about spirituality, I think it's just that. I mean, when you think about it, it's a reality outside of Earth, bigger than Earth, the real reality, if we'd call it that. And if we take it one dimension down, if there was a such thing as a two-dimensional universe, our three-dimensional universe would be far vast superior to that. So we can kind of understand it in those terms. But when we say multiverse, that's what we mean. Unfortunately, that term has got a bunch of bad baggage attached to it just from scientists with some of these really anti-God theories. But that doesn't mean that the actual theory behind the idea of a multiverse can't be possible. There's actually a lot of scientific evidence showing that there likely are multiple dimensions. The only question is, how big are they? How many are they? Can we explore them? Which I don't think is a good idea, because to me that's borderline witchcraft, entering into a spiritual world that we have no business being in. That's one of the concerns I would say about CERN, because they want to explore and map extra dimensions. I think that's a mistake. But just admitting that they're there, or the possibility that these other dimensions might exist, I think can actually help us as Christians understand the reality that we're living in even better.
We're going to take a short break here so that you can find out more about our magazine, which has topics like this in it. The magazine is awesome because we are willing to venture out and to talk about things that oftentimes Christians don't want to talk about, and that's okay. But we believe strongly that the Bible has the answers. And so the magazine that we have is a great way to invite scholars like yourself or others to come in and to give us biblical worldview. So we're going to take a break for a minute.
We have a very special subscription offer for you. We've never done anything quite like this before. For your gift of $50 or more to support the worldwide outreach of Prophecy Watchers, you can subscribe to either the digital or print version of our magazine. And here's the best part. In addition to 12 issues of the magazine, this offer comes with a fantastic bonus: 8 DVDs from some of the leading prophecy experts in the world, including our founder, Gary Stearman. 8 DVDs plus 12 issues of the magazine represents a $225 value, all for your gift of just $50 or more to support Prophecy Watchers. This offer is available anywhere in the USA and will ship both the magazine and the DVDs to you absolutely free. Don't wait or hesitate. Call the toll-free number on the screen or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv to take advantage of this limited time offer.
One of the things that we think about in 2 Kings chapter 2 is, we have, or even there as well as in 2 Kings chapter 6, it's kind of a neat little book, but you have in chapter 6 this insight where we know the story. There's Elisha sitting there with his servant. They're surrounded by enemies, and Elisha is a little frustrated. He says, "Oh, Lord, open his eyes, let him see." So somehow Elisha was given access to, and God answered the prayer where he saw something. And the servant opened his eyes, and he said he saw chariots of fire that were sitting there behind the scenes. I mean, I don't know if there's any greater illustration of this idea of a multiverse.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So they were there the whole time, they just couldn't be seen. And that's really all it is. I mean, like the angel that killed 10,000 people. Well, it couldn't have been seen the whole time because they would have been able to take care of it. So it really does speak to this extra reality around us. And if it could be seen then, it could be seen today. The problem is, unfortunately, it's not just God letting people see things. Human beings have taken it upon themselves to go and get into this stuff themselves. We're going to go explore these other dimensions and see what there is themselves. So while it is kind of nice we live in a time where there's at least a belief that those realities exist, the interpretation, again, going back to interpretation, is very anti-Christian. So all we need to do is fix the interpretation. Yeah, there are multiple dimensions, probably. There's extra dimensions. There's definitely higher realities, because we read about that in the Bible. So really, it's just all about terminology. So these things do exist.
You know, and sometimes we forget that. You think about even on electromagnetic radiation, you know, what we would call, you know, light and other things, that it's on a very specific sequence. But if you think about our radio waves or television waves that we don't see with our eyes, are they any less physical than light waves that we see in that range?
I mean, they interact with our physical world. We have receivers that can pick them up and translate it into something that we can understand. So, I mean, yeah, it's something that we can't see that's interacting with our world all the time. It's just we're used to it because we use it all the time. So why couldn't there be other things, possibly with a conscience, you know, that can actually make decisions on how it's going to manipulate the world around it. So the best way that I try to think about this, because we can't imagine even a fourth dimension like of space. I can't, nobody can, but we can imagine a two-dimensional universe. So if there was a flat universe, totally two-dimensional, how could they develop some technology where they could see us? And, you know, maybe, but it seems like that device itself would also have to be extra dimensional. So I don't know, but I have thought about that before, and it's really interesting. Yeah. But it also shows how these beings on the other side, they have, in a sense, limited capabilities on how they're going to manipulate our world. You know, a common example is like ghost hunters will always use electromagnetic thing. They use those, and these meters will go off, and things are being detected. Now, whether it's a ghost or not, who knows? But things are actually being detected. So in the same way, if I were to try to interact with a two-dimensional universe, I'd be very limited on what I could do because I have a three-dimensional body. You know, I might be able to put a finger in Flatland, but Flatland's an example that's, it's a common example that's used to explain this idea. But the being, the two-dimensional being, the Flatlander would not see my whole finger. It would just see a two-dimensional cross-section of it. So it would see a circle. And that kind of stuff. So if we think about that, is there anything in our reality that we see that pops in out of nowhere, and it looks three-dimensional, but it changed shapes, it changed sizes, and of course that gets into the UFO stuff. Yeah. So I write about that a lot too, that we do actually see examples of this in our own reality, where seemingly solid objects can change shape. It's exactly what you would expect if extra dimensions are real.
You know, it's interesting being a pastor. I was a pastor for a long time, and you know, when you're in a small setting, small group or whatever, you know, and people feel safe, sometimes, you know, they would say, hey, Mondo, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? They would never say that publicly, because the idea of, you think about all the things that we are taboo, UFOs, Bigfoot, aliens, alien abduction, and they're right, because here you have the purity of a Christian, maybe even a new believer, looking to the Lord, looking to God, looking to the Bible as the rule of faith, if you want to say it that way, God's guidebook for us. And they're saying, does the Bible talk about this?
Well, biblically, it's pretty simple. I mean, if we're going to use the Bible as our foundation for truth, then we know that certain things exist. God exists, heaven exists, hell exists, angels, demons, all the things that are talked about, and of course, we humans. But the only difference is locality. A lot of these things that are talked about in the Bible, these spiritual things, it's just a different location, different dimension, different, whatever term we want to put on it, and that's really all it is it's different terms to explain the same thing. The spiritual world, the extra-dimensional world, the multiverse is a very mysterious place, and we only know a very small fraction of our very small part in it. So it is absolutely interesting to think about possibilities, but we have to be grounded in something because, again, so many scientists that talk about this, they go New Age or they just go straight atheistic. So I would say for somebody who's interested in that, read about angels, read about heaven. There's many places in the Bible that talks about it, and it's really simple. And get that foundation, and or you can do that in my book too, because I do the same thing. I go through all the places that talk about that kind of stuff in the Bible and show how that mirrors what scientists are saying about extra dimensions today. It's just they won't make that connection because they don't want to be held accountable to God, so it's easier for them to believe he doesn't exist.
Some things that they're describing, they're going to use term extra-dimensional, multidimensional. Oftentimes Christians, in a very innocent way, they'll just throw the spiritual label on
Yeah.
it. They won't use that term, but in fact, we're making reference to the same
Yes.
raw material, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe that those terms are synonymous. So when they're talking about extra dimensions, scientists, they're talking about heaven and hell, and they just don't call it that. They don't know that's what it is. But they know that there's something else out there, and they really want to explore it.
Yeah, there's definitely a reason when you look under the Old Testament and even in the New Testament to some degree that God forbid anyone that claimed to be able to bring these two different realities together and to, the Bible absolutely never endorses or even confirms this idea that our ancestors are out there and they can speak to us. Not even close. It's they're when you die, it's judgment. You're in one or two places, and they're not out there wandering in order to speak. So that's super important that we don't get sucked into that. We're going to take a little break here because I think your book is awesome. I mean,
Thank
for
you.
those that really want to get into some of the deep topics that love science, that love getting into some of the mysteries.
Yeah.
We're going to take a little break here to see how you can get Josh's book.
I've heard it said that the world we live in, the universe we can see with our own eyes, is separated by another dimension, a parallel universe. Are there other worlds out there? Life on other planets? We see numerous events described in the Bible that defy our limited human imagination. Times when men's eyes are briefly opened and they're allowed to see things that are not visible under normal circumstances. Unidentified flying objects appear, perform impossible, high-speed, gravity-defying maneuvers, and then instantly disappear. That thin veil that separates heaven from earth is occasionally broken by curious terms that are not always familiar to the average person. Black holes, time warps, time travel, quantum physics. Is there anyone that really understands these mysteries of God's creation? Josh Peck does, and he's written a book that will quickly bring you up to speed on the latest research that should convince even the most hardened skeptic that a divine being created the world we live in expressly for our enjoyment. Josh's new book, Unraveling the Multiverse, is available from our ministry for your gift of $25 or more, with shipping included anywhere in the USA. We've also included a free bonus DVD, a live message Josh recorded at a recent prophecy conference, Afterlife, unraveling the biggest mysteries of life, death, and beyond. It will answer all of your questions about your eternal future, the mysteries of heaven and hell, and what's on the other side. Just call the toll-free number on your screen where we have operators available 24/7, or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv, where you can find all of Josh's advanced research. If you'd like to take your study on these curious subjects to a whole new level, reading about things you will likely never hear about in church, we've put together a special package that we're calling the Afterlife package. It includes 3 books: Josh's book, Unraveling the Multiverse, What Dwells Beyond by Jeffrey Mardis, and Josh's best-selling book, Afterlife, a book that will take you places you've never been before to study curious subjects like the Shroud of Turin, near-death and out-of-body experiences, and the origin of both heaven and hell. Even better, when you order the Afterlife package for your gift of $60 or more, we're going to send you Josh's brand new DVD on the burgeoning UFO phenomenon, The Great Delusion. This free bonus, a $25 value, is yours as our way of saying thank you for supporting our television program and the important work of Prophecy Watchers. The Bible is a supernatural book full of the mysteries of God's creation. There's another world out there that today is invisible to our eyes, but one day soon, that veil will be lifted and we'll have all eternity to explore the mysteries of God's amazing creation. Be encouraged, because that day is coming very soon.
Well, Josh, as we come back from the break, one of the things that I would love to get your thoughts on other dimensions that are non-perceivable.
Right.
So in that sense, we think about the digital world, right? The kids,
Yeah.
right? Let's talk about the digital world. What the new fad? Facebook.
Yeah.
You're going to say, I don't know Facebook. Who's Facebook? Facebook's now called, they have their parent company called Meta,
Yep.
and they want to be known as the metaverse. What's the metaverse?
Yeah. So basically, the metaverse is augmented reality, and it's actually kind of funny because it's sort of, you could say it's a perversion of the reality that God created. So God created, physical world that we can perceive, but then there's this extra spiritual stuff that we can't perceive, but it's still there. Well, what the metaverse does is it creates this other reality, and you can access it anytime you want. So it's not like Christianity where you can't go to heaven whenever you want. And not only that, but you can create your own reality. In a sense, you get to be your own God. Now, some people are going to look at that and say, well, it's just social media stuff. And most people are probably just going to use it for that, and it's, maybe will be pretty benign. But when you look at what it's actually doing, what the message is that people using this are going to receive, I worry about mainly kids that are going to be brought up in this world. Me and you, we're still on this side of the metaverse. When the metaverse actually happens, it'll probably be a big deal, and a lot of people will probably use it, but we'll remember a time before. Like I remember a time before the internet. Like my kids, if the metaverse gets rolled out in the next 5 or 10 years, at least my youngest ones probably won't know a world without the metaverse. So what is that teaching kids? It's teaching them they can create their own reality. They can do whatever they want in that reality, and they don't have to be bound to the physical world. I mean, in a sense, it's teaching people to be their own gods. And that's where I think the danger is. It's like we have to realize, like, okay, this is technology, it's a tool, they're just like the internet, there's probably good and bad uses for it. But this isn't something to escape to into this fantasy where you're creating your own world, you're your own God, and you play around like that for a while, because that's just straight up deception, even if it's just to play a game. It's deception, and that can over time take root in your mind and overtake everything.
It's interesting when you watch this really isn't going away. I mean, Zuckerberg and Facebook, they spending really hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
They don't do this for no reason at all, haphazardly. They're spending money. I just read this morning, Adidas is jumping in. They're spending money. Nike's jumping in order to participate in this digital fantasy world.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So people will, put on glasses or goggles or whatever to enter into this world, and but they want to make it like a real place. Like they envision people having business meetings from other continents, and they can meet in this virtual boardroom, and things like that already occur now. Yeah. That I don't see as much as dangerous, because that's just using it as a tool. That's what technology should be anyway. But how addicted kids are to screens as it is, imagine if they could actually immerse themselves in that. I mean, that I think is troubling.
Yeah. When you think about the confusion that you have with kids today, and as you mentioned, so many of them are going to be raised in this environment, they're not going to have really any grasp. As we wrap up here, this distinction between what's real and isn't, it's going to blur, right?
Yeah, because technically that digital world is real. It's made of numbers and ones and zeros, but I mean, in a sense, it exists. It's not physical, but it exists. So yeah, I mean, that we're going to be entering a world where the lines between physical, spiritual, they're going to be blurred, and I think it's going to cause people even more to want to experiment with the real metaverse, the real spiritual world out there, and that's another danger too.
Well, if you want to get to some of the foundation level of what we're seeing in our culture, I mean, Josh's book is well done. And
thank you.
It'll provide that foundation for you. And as always, here at Prophecy Watchers, we are here, we're watching, and we want to really stay abreast of all the trends that are coming in order to provide a biblical worldview to everything. We ask for your prayers, as always, because we can't do without that. We want God to be at the center of what we're doing here, because the ultimate goal, as Josh mentioned, is to prevent confusion and to point people to Jesus Christ, knowing that salvation can only be found in Him. So we appreciate you watching today, and we will see you next time.